We all have one thing we're ashamed of. The memory of one moment so embarrassing. I was in boarding school, in the middle of nowhere. Everyone at Woodhill College was obsessed with rugby. And I didn't hate rugby, but what happened if you didn't love it? I was persecuted daily.
We're listening there to an extract from the trailer of Handsome Devil, a movie that was released in 2017 about the relationship between a bullied outsider and a rugby athlete who are forced to share a room at a boarding school in the Irish capital, Dublin. And in Live on Live this Monday, I am delighted to welcome in studio the writer and director of Handsome Devil, John Butler. You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a long time, John, and it's great to see you here back in Paris. But first and foremost for our listeners today, just tell us all, what got you on the path towards making feature films?
Well, I'm a writer and director, and I would say the writer part of me is pretty strong. And so in my early career, I was writing short TV sketches, little bits and pieces for radio, trying to figure out what I wanted to say. It was always comic, but when you're young, it's hard to get money to make things that are long. So invariably it was short form stuff, short films, the occasional commercial. And then I wrote a novel in 2010, I think, called The Tenderloin. And that was the first kind of full expression of what I would characterised as my voice. And around that time I also had a weekly column in the Irish Times newspaper. So those two moments in my life really made it clear to me that I might have had something to say. They both went reasonably well, and from there it was a question of how do I get the money to make my first feature film.
So that was your first creative outlet, was through writing and through those little baby steps, if you will, kind of heading towards filmmaking. But just a quick thing, going from storytelling, the Irish are very good, are very pretty much world renowned for their storytelling skills, but less so necessarily for their direction skills, or for their, definitely in the past, not the present company accepted, of course. But is it a natural progression, or at least was it for you to go from writing to directing feature films? Is it a natural transition?
No. The type of storytelling that Irish people are renowned for is very free-form and unstructured, and the literature that is most acclaimed is the kind of absolutely unadaptable mania of Joyce and writers like that.
Indeed.
And people always go, oh, why is there no film of Ulysses? And the answer is because filmmaking is a very formal structure and screenwriting is a craft. So
it'd be kind of like a turn of the century Naked Lunch, really. How would you actually capture Ulysses and put it down on film? How would you do it?
I have no idea, and I love it, and I love that type of writing. But the perfect métier for that expression is the novel.
Sure.
So film is just very structural and very formal, and screenwriting is a trade, a craft that is learnable.
Yeah.
So I just really set about doing that, and I always knew I wanted to do film stuff, but it is a question of breaking down the walls and getting in there. And
you touched on it there in the beginning that you did before Handsome Devil came out. You did have more low budget films that came out. The Stag and what was it? Spaceman 3. That was the other one. But as a writer and director, and especially in the case of Handsome Devil, which I saw and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it really touched into a kind of our upbringing in South Dublin, and of course it tapped into some of your aspects of your secondary education in Blackrock College. For anybody who knows anything about Ireland, Blackrock College is the rugby school in Ireland, and the school in the film is very much based on Blackrock. But because you wrote it, because you directed it, and because of your personal kind of experience growing up through Blackrock College, did that make you more demanding and less compromising when it came to your producers and dealing with the final product, if you will?
Well, the team is me and my producers, and the enemy exists outside of that. So
Gotcha.
I'm a lucky man. My producers are fantastic. And they totally bought into what I wanted to say, which is, my experience as a gay kid who was very into sport and found it very difficult to reconcile those two things. And the idea of wanting to make like a John Hughes type film about a gay rugby player and his friend in boarding school, they were completely on board with that. And we three collectively kind of went to war and got the money to make it. And then it was just a question of really trying to be truthful.
Sure. So you're all on the same page before the project even really starts filming, starts turning, before the first camera goes on. You're all very much on the same team.
Yeah, you know, we're all in our 40s and would have grown up watching John Hughes films, which are littered with casual homophobia, which upon rewatching is quite surprising.
Indeed, there was a revisiting recently there of The Breakfast Club, where it's like you wouldn't get away with any of the, well, half of the scenes there that are in it, especially when, what was it, Bender is like, you know, feeling up one of the girls played by, what was her in Pretty in Pink?
Molly Ringwald.
Molly Ringwald, that's it, exactly.
No, times have changed, and for the better, objectively, and it's not at the expense of comedy. You can be funny in 2018 as you could in 1985. So, you know, the lazy argument about political correctness in film and comedy and television is just that. There are ways to be funny. So, but that was our aim, was like, let us make a film that speaks at the level of young people about what the experience of being young and gay and into sport is.
Now, you're mentioning John Hughes there. You have another film in the pipeline, Papi Chulo. How is that developing? Is that, what stage are you now in the development? And tell us a bit about the story of it.
It just it premiered 1 month ago at the Toronto International Film Festival.
It's out.
It's out. No, it's being released in America next April. On about I think 35 screens there. So it's an American. Well, no, it's an Irish film because the creative talent is Irish and the money is Irish, but it's set in America, and it's about a lonely gay weatherman played by Matt Bomer who drives past a hardware store and sees a friendly-looking middle-aged Latino migrant worker and decides to hire him to be his friend.
Just as his friend?
Well, initially to paint, to do some home repairs, which is, you know, the incredible thing as an outsider when you visit California is that outside hardware stores, there are always lines of migrant workers looking for employment, casual labour.
Sure.
You know, so he hires this guy to help him to paint his deck, and then a sort of friendship begins to develop, an odd couple friendship based on sign language and music and the things that we can say, the lingua franca of humanity.
Wow. I mean, that must have been that was a challenge to come up with that, and trying to actually get that on film for an audience to actually grasp it.
Well, I think after Handsome Devil, I had like a chip to play in terms of what I wanted to do, and I wrote a script that worked, and it sprang from my own experience in LA. I didn't ever hire a Latino migrant worker to be my friend, but I know what it is to be lonely in a big city.
Sure.
So I think there was the same kind of kernel of truth to it, and I think people responded to that.
So you're kind of looking, you're very much, a little thread now seems to be appearing, especially from Handsome Devil to Papi Chulo, of this kind of loneliness, being kind of outcast, not being a member of the mainstream society, and just trying to have a little window from the outside in. But do you think now with these two films that you've carved out a niche for yourself with a certain audience? You mentioned John Hughes there. I mean, it was that he was the niche.
Yeah.
He'd cornered the market.
Yeah.
And we have our friend and colleague that we both know from Dublin, John Carney, who's really carved out this kind of feel-good music niche with his films, with writing and directing Once, which got an Oscar for the best score, was it? Or was it the best song? Best song, that was it. And also Sing Street. So he's become very renowned, but he said, producers look at me and they say, right, that's my niche. Are you going in the same direction with this kind of thread? Well,
I don't. I mean, I make comedy dramas, so my niche perhaps isn't quite as specific as that. Up and down the scale of comedy drama for me, I make films about loneliness, of course. There's themes of male friendship certainly in there. But it's not, whatever niche is not based on genre so much as maybe theme and tone, and that's something that you can bounce around in. Like, there are other types of film that I'm looking forward to making in the future. To be a writer-director and to be making films that have jokes in them and make people feel good is all right for now.
Yeah.
And I don't feel pigeonholed at all. And I think it's your own responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen.
And exactly, that's a good thing. And of course, but would you accept getting a director role but not being a writer on the film? Is that something that you would actually just say, you'd take up the challenge? I
read a ton of scripts. I get sent scripts frequently, and I read them, and I'm always interested. I would love to get a script and read it and just be blown away and really want to make it. Yeah.
Now, indeed, you're saying now you're getting scripts that are coming in. Let's look at the actual movie industry itself in America, but I suppose generally everywhere. And there's a certain catch-22 when making, your first feature film. Basically, if you're coming to producers, say, if you want me to bankroll your first feature film, you have to show me your first feature film.
Yeah.
So how does one get around that? How does one make a breakthrough?
What the phrase that you were hammered with as a first-time filmmaker is execution dependent, and particularly
execution dependent.
Yeah, and in the world of comedy, execution dependent is what you'll hear all the time. You can write a great script, as I did for The Stag with my friend Peter MacDonald, and it was objectively a script that worked, and the people who we brought it to try and get money said, well, it's execution dependent, which is to say it depends on how you make it. It may not work. And so you're right, it's a really difficult one to get over. You have to have good producers who believe in you and who know how to extract a little bit of money from somewhere. But I directed The Stag for an impossibly low amount of money, and then A Handsome Devil for also a very low amount of money, and then Papi Chulo for quite a low amount of money too. You can see a pattern emerging here, Dave. I'm cheap, so
you're cheap but willing.
Yeah, so it's an uphill battle constantly. The execution dependent thing goes away when you've made 3 that work, but still, that's the thing that is the stick with which they'll beat you. If I ever set up a production company, it's going to be called Execution Dependent Films. Execution Dependent Films.
Well, John, we've only got a minute or so left. You're here in Paris to screen Handsome Devil at the Irish Cultural Centre. Just have a quick thing here. Getting distribution these days across Europe and into foreign countries, distribution still seems to be a challenge. But Netflix and these vectors such as Netflix and Amazon Prime are really a foothold now for young, like startup directors such as yourself. What about the old distribution networks? Are they still there? Are they still, there for indie films?
Yeah, you have to want it. Like Papi Chulo, we went with a distributor who perhaps wasn't offering us the best deal, but was guaranteeing a theatrical release. So it's going to 35 screens next May in America. You have to decide, and you have to have courage.
Yes. And choose your, and they will be able to decide what kind of cinemas that will be going to, what the actual market is that they'll be tapping into.
Yeah, they'll make their deal, and you just have to back yourself to get out there and make a little noise.
Yeah.
Handsome Devil's on the 13th of November at 7:30 p.m.
13th of November, 7:30 p.m.
in the Centre Culturel
Irlandais here in Paris's 5th arrondissement. Well, John, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for being on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
And for all of us here on Paris Live PM, that's all we have time for today. But don't worry, we'll be back same time tomorrow here on Radio France International.